She said I was trespassing. On my own land, that's how it started. I had just come back from a supply run, carrying 2 bags of groceries and a busted lantern when I saw her, Karen, standing on my porch like she owned the place. A printed notice was taped to my door in bold red letters. HOA violation, immediate eviction. I didn't even have an HOA. What is this? I asked, trying to stay calm. She crossed her arms, fake smile glued to her face. You can't live here anymore. This cabin is now under the HOA's jurisdiction. I laughed, thinking it was some mix-up. Lady, I bought this place fair and square. It's my land. Her expression didn't change. Not anymore. The property value increased. You didn't pay the maintenance dues. I stared at her. Maintenance dues? The nearest neighbor was 2 miles away, and this cabin didn't even have running water half the year. Something was off. Then she pulled out her phone and started recording. Refusing to vacate, threatening HOA authority, she said loud enough for her camera to catch it. My chest tightened. I stepped back slowly, not wanting trouble, but her smirk only grew wider. You'll regret this, she whispered. That night, I found tire tracks near my fence line and a fresh lock on my gate that wasn't mine. My cabin, my quiet escape, had turned into someone else's game board, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was back in enemy territory. By morning, the fake notice was gone, but in its place, a for sale sign stood at the edge of my driveway. Brand new, shining in the sun with bold black letters. Property managed by Ridgewood HOA. I stared at it, speechless. I hadn't signed a single paper, hadn't agreed to any HOA. This was my land. Bought through a government auction, paid in full, 25 cents. A legal steal from an old federal claim. When I called the number on the sign, a cheerful voice answered, Ridgewood Homeowners Association, this is Karen speaking. Of course it was. I think there's been a mistake, I said, keeping my voice steady. You've put a sign on private land that isn't part of your association. Oh no, sir, she replied, her tone dripping with fake concern. We recently expanded jurisdiction. You're within our community limits now. Jurisdiction? I almost laughed. Lady, this is half a mile from your fancy gates. There's nothing here but pine trees and squirrels. She paused. We have new zoning rights. You'll need to vacate within 72 hours or face penalties. Click. She hung up. That was the moment I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a setup. When I drove to town to pull the county records, something even stranger showed up. My property deed was missing from the online system. Gone. Like it never existed. The clerk frowned at her screen. That's weird. It says the land was recently transferred to Ridgewood HOA Holdings. I felt a chill crawl down my spine. Transferred by who? She leaned closer, lowering her voice. By someone named Karen Walters. My hands shook on the steering wheel as I drove back toward the cabin. Every mile felt heavier, like the woods themselves were holding their breath. By the time I reached my gate, the for sale sign was gone, but Karen's white SUV was parked right in front of my porch. She was waiting. I stepped out slowly. You forged county documents, I said. My voice came out calm, but my heart was pounding hard enough to hear. She tilted her head, pretending confusion. Oh, I wouldn't say forged. Just updated. You didn't keep up with the changes. You can't change what you don't own. Karen smiled, that same smug curve that made my skin crawl. You'll learn how things work around here. People like you never read the fine print. I took a deep breath. People like me? She looked me up and down. The old truck, my worn jacket, the scars I still carried from service. Drifters. Veterans who think the law doesn't apply to them. Her words hit like a slap, but I didn't move. Not yet. Here's what's going to happen, she said, stepping closer. Tomorrow, contractors will arrive to remove your belongings. You can take what fits in your truck. The rest will be property of the HOA. I just stared at her, silent. She leaned in, whispering, You think you're tough? But you'll fold just like the others. That's when she made her biggest mistake. She reached out and touched my arm. The second her hand made contact, I turned my wrist fast, precise, just like I was trained. Her wrist twisted, not hard enough to break, but enough to make her stumble back. She gasped, clutching her arm. You just assaulted an HOA officer. Lady, I said, locking eyes with her. You just trespassed on private property. She fumbled for her phone, yelling into it, calling the police. Right now. I didn't stop her. In fact, I hoped she would. because the officers who'd show up wouldn't be the kind she expected. 20 minutes later, 2 police cruisers rolled up the gravel road, lights flashing through the trees. Karen stood tall, pretending to be injured, fake tears on her cheeks. "There," she cried, pointing at me. "That's him. He attacked me and refused to leave HOA property." One of the officers stepped out, a tall man with a sharp jawline and steady eyes. He looked at me, then at her, then back at me again. Something flickered in his expression. Recognition. "Sir," he said carefully, "do you have any ID?" I nodded, reached into my jacket, and handed over my wallet. He flipped it open, froze, and then straightened his posture. Karen noticed the change instantly. "What are you waiting for?" "Arrest him." The officer cleared his throat. "Ma'am, this man's federal ID says retired U.S. Marshal." Karen blinked. "What? That's fake." "He's lying." But the other officer was already checking the database on his tablet. His voice was quiet but firm. "It's real, verified." I crossed my arms. "You wanted the law involved, Karen. Well, here it is." She stepped back, her voice shaking but still full of arrogance. He can't own this land. It's under Ridgewood HOA." I pulled a folded document from my pocket. The original government auction deed. "You mean this land?" I said, holding it up. "Bought legally, signed by the county clerk before your HOA even existed." Her face went pale. "That's impossible." The first officer looked at her with quiet suspicion. "Ma'am, do you have documentation to support your claim?" Karen hesitated. I'll get it later." "Then for now," he said, "you're trespassing on private property." Her eyes widened. "What?" The officers motioned for her to step aside. She started screaming about corruption and favoritism, her voice echoing through the trees. But before they left, the officer leaned close to me and whispered, "You're not the first person she's pulled this on. Be careful. She's got people in the county office." That one sentence hit harder than anything she'd said all day, because if Karen had connections inside the system, this wasn't just about my cabin anymore. That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the cabin felt louder, every shadow sharper. The cops had left after giving Karen a warning, but I knew she wasn't done. People like her never quit when they lose. They just find dirtier ways to win. I sat by the window with my old service flashlight, watching the tree line. Around midnight, I saw headlights flicker through the woods. 3 trucks, no plates. They stopped right at the gate. I grabbed my phone and hit record. A man in a construction vest stepped out, holding a clipboard. "We're here for removal, HOA order." "Removal of what?" I asked, opening the door. He shrugged. "Cabin, belongings, whatever's listed." He wasn't looking at me, he was looking past me, waiting for someone else's signal. And then she appeared. Karen, standing in the dark with a flashlight of her own, smiling like this was some kind of victory ceremony. "You were warned," she said. "Now it's official." I raised my phone higher. "You're on camera, Karen, you and your fake crew." "Fake?" She scoffed. "These are licensed contractors." I pointed at the trucks. "Then why don't they have business plates?" She faltered for a second but recovered quickly. "We don't need to explain ourselves to squatters." Before I could answer, one of the men moved toward the cabin door with a crowbar. That's when I whistled once, sharp and loud. From behind the cabin, 2 figures stepped into the porch light. My neighbors Jake and Rosa, both ex-military, both carrying body cams. Jake lifted his phone. "Already live streaming," he said. Karen froze. The men stopped moving. Rosa spoke calmly. "Touch that door and you'll be breaking and entering. We'll hand the footage straight to the sheriff's office." Karen's smirk cracked. "You think anyone cares about some live stream?" Jake smiled. "Oh, you'll care. The sheriff's watching it right now." Her face drained of color. Within minutes, the truck started backing away. Karen didn't move, just stood there trembling with rage. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," she hissed. I looked her dead in the eye. "Neither do you." She stormed off into the dark, but deep down I knew this wasn't over. Because if she really had friends in the county, she'd find another way to come for me, and next time she wouldn't come at night. By sunrise, I had 10 missed calls from unknown numbers and 1 voicemail that made my stomach twist. "Mr. Dalton, this is the county zoning office. We received multiple complaints regarding illegal land possession and tax fraud on your property. You are required to vacate within 48 hours pending investigation." Tax fraud? I hadn't even filed this year yet. I drove straight to the county building, heart pounding the whole way. The clerk at the front desk wouldn't meet my eyes. "I'm sorry, sir. Your file's under review. We can't disclose anything." "Who filed the complaint?" She hesitated, then whispered. It came from Ridgewood HOA Legal Division. There it was again, Karen's shadow, creeping through official paper trails now. As I walked out, a man in a suit was waiting near my truck. "Mr. Dalton?" "Who's asking?" He smiled thinly. "Attorney for Ridgewood HOA. You're trespassing on HOA-managed property. If you don't comply, we'll seize the structure under emergency municipal authority." I laughed once, dry and cold. "Municipal authority? You think printing fake paperwork makes it real?" He pulled out a folder, waved it lightly. "We don't need to fake it. We just need it long enough to scare you off." That line told me everything. This wasn't about law, it was about pressure. They wanted me gone before anyone dug too deep. Back at the cabin, I pulled out the hard drive from my security cameras and started digging through the footage. Then frame by frame, I saw it. 2 nights ago, someone had broken into the county storage office, the same night my deed disappeared from their system, and standing by the door, holding a flashlight, was Karen. Her face was clear, her name tag glowing under the light. I copied the footage to a new drive and called someone I hadn't spoken to in years, an old friend from the Marshall days, now working cyber forensics at the state office. When he answered, I didn't waste time. "Hey Rob, remember that cabin I bought for 25 cents? He laughed. "Yeah, your lucky deal. What about it?" It just turned into a $10 million fight. There was silence on the line, then a sigh. "Send me everything. Let's take their house of cards down." By evening, Rob had called back. His voice was low, urgent. "You weren't kidding, man." I traced the HOA's filings. Karen's not just faking notices. She's been funneling properties into a shell company. Dozens of them. All reassigned through hacked county databases. My grip tightened on the phone. "So she's stealing land on paper?" "Exactly. You're just the first one who didn't back down." I looked out at the tree line where the wind was picking up again. "How do we stop her?" He paused. "You don't, we do. I already sent the footage to the State Fraud Division. But we need her to try one more move, to catch her red-handed." I didn't have to wait long. The next day, a black SUV rolled up with Karen inside, flanked by 2 men in suits. Cameras followed. They brought a local news crew. She wanted a show. As soon as she stepped out, she raised her voice, fake authority dripping off every word. "We're evicting an illegal squatter who forged ownership documents. The Ridgewood HOA stands for community integrity." I stood by the porch, calm. "You sure you want to say that on record?" She smirked. "Absolutely." Then from behind me, another vehicle pulled in, an unmarked state SUV. Rob stepped out with 2 investigators and a sheriff's deputy. Cameras still rolling. "Ma'am," one of the investigators said, walking straight toward Karen, "we'd like to ask you about several properties transferred under your signature." Karen's smile flickered. "This is ridiculous. These men are trespassing." The deputy held up a badge. "Actually, ma'am, this is your trespassing case." He turned to the reporter. "Might as well keep filming. Transparency, right?" Karen's voice cracked. "You have no proof." Rob held up a tablet, screen glowing with the security footage. Her breaking into the county office, time-stamp clear. "You sure about that?" Her 2 lawyers started backing away, realizing the show was over. The investigator read from a file. "Karen Walters, you're under arrest for property fraud, forgery of public documents, and impersonation of a legal entity." The camera caught everything. Her face, her panic, the exact moment her fake authority crumbled. As they cuffed her, she twisted toward me, shouting, "You'll lose this place anyway." "You'll see." I just looked at her and said quietly, "This land was never yours to take." A week later, the woods were quiet again. No trucks, no shouting, no fake notices on my door. Just wind, pine, and the soft creak of the old porch swing. The county reinstated my deed within days after the arrest. The news called it the biggest HOA fraud ring in the state. 37 families almost lost their homes. Karen's face was everywhere. Mugshots, news clips, endless online threads. People couldn't believe someone like her had been running things for years. I didn't feel proud. I felt tired. But it was the good kind of tired. The kind that comes after a long fight finally ends, Rob called that evening. "You're officially cleared," he said. "State's pressing charges against her and her partners. You did good, man." I looked out at the sunset burning behind the trees. Didn't do it just for me, I said quietly. She would have done this to anyone, he chuckled. Still, only you would turn a 25-cent cabin into a $10 million headline. I laughed for the first time in days. Guess it was worth every penny. Later that night, I walked down to the lake behind the cabin. The water reflected the stars, calm and endless. I thought about how close I'd come to losing it all, because of one person's greed, one forged document. But the truth is, it was never about money. It was about freedom, the right to own something honest, something real, something earned. I ran my hand over the railing, rough wood under my fingers. I fought for this country, I whispered, and I'll fight for this land too. In the distance, an owl called, the forest alive again, and for the first time since this all began, I finally felt home. I didn't buy a cabin for 25 cents just to hand it over to a fake queen of a fake HOA. Some of us still believe in earning what we own.